Hello everybody. Welcome you all in this online edu classes for class 8th social science. Here I am with the video for chapter 6 of history, weavers, iron smelters and the factory owners, part 3. In the previous parts we have already discussed about the variety of Indian textiles that were popular throughout the world and the rise and decline of the Indian textiles in the world market. In this video, we will be learning about the iron and steel industry. This video is presented before you by Minakshi Pandey. Let us now see the learning objectives of this video. When you will go through the video, you will be knowing about the sword of Tipu Sultan and the wood steel that was used to make that sword. You will also come to know about the reasons for the abandoned furnaces in the villages. Along with that, you will also come to know about the iron and steel factories that come up in India during the 19th and 20th century. So let us begin with our learning. Tipu Sultan, the ruler of Mysore. The swords of Tipu Sultan are still a part of valuable collection in the museum in England. The sword had an incredibly hard and sharp edge. His sword was made up of a special kind of high carbon steel called woods. It was because of extremely small carbon crystals that were embedded in the iron. Francis Buchanan, who visited Mysore in 1800, a year after Tipu Sultan's death, has left us an account of the technique by which wood steel was produced in many hundreds of smelting furnaces in Mysore. In Bihar and central India, in particular, every district had smelters that used local deposits of ore to produce iron, which was widely used for the manufacture of implements and daily tools. Wood steel was produced in many smelting furnaces in Mysore. Now, let us know, in these furnaces, iron was mixed with charcoal and put inside small clay pots. The smelters produced steel ingots with perfect control of temperatures. Great scientist Michael Faraday spent 4 years studying the Indian wood steel. He was the discoverer of electricity and electromagnetism. However, the wood steel making process, which was so widely known in South India, was completely lost by the mid-19th century. Can you guess why this was so? When we talk about it, let us know the reasons behind the decline of wood steel making. Production of wood steel required a highly specialized technique of refining iron. But iron smelting in India was extremely common till the end of 19th century. Import of iron from Britain replaced the iron and steel making craft in India. The furnaces were most often built of clay and sun-dried bricks. This smelting was done by the men while the women worked the bellows, pumping the air that kept the charcoal burning. By the 19th century, however, the craft of iron smelting was in decline. Let us now know the reasons responsible for the abandoned furnaces in India. One of the major reasons, the sword and armor making industry died with the conquest of the Britishers in India. Not only that, apart from that, there were certain forest laws that were made by the Britishers. If you remember, for chapter 4, where we studied the colonial government which prevented the people from entering the reserved forest. How could the iron smelters find wood for charcoal? Where could they get iron ore from? Defying the forest law, then often entered the forest secretly and collected wood. But they could not sustain their occupation on the basis for long. The iron smelters were struggling for the iron ore and the charcoal. In some areas, the government did grant access to the forest, but the iron smelters had to pay very high taxes to the forest department for every furnace they used. This reduced their income. Now, let us know about the iron and steel factories that were coming up in India. In the year 1904, Charswell and Dorabji Tata travelled throughout Chhattisgarh in search of iron ore deposits to set up a modern iron and steel industry. One day, after travelling for many hours in the forest, Dorabji and Well found few agarias who pointed towards the Rajhara hills from where they were carrying down those iron ores. But there was a problem. The region was dry and water necessary for running the factory was not to be found nearby. The Tatas had to continue their search for a more suitable place to set up their factory. A few years later, a large area of forest was cleared on the banks of river Subarnarekha to set up the factory and the industrial township Jamshedpur. On the bank of river Subarnarekha, the Tata Iron and Steel Company was established. The production started in the year 1912. TISCO was set up at an opportune time. By the time TISCO was set up, the situation was changing. In 1914, the First World War broke out. Steel produced in Britain now had to meet the demands of war in Europe. So, imports of British steel into India declined dramatically, and the Indian Railways turned to TISCO for supply of rails. As the war dragged on for several years, TISCO had to produce shells and carriage wheels for the war. By 1919, the colonial government was buying 90% of the steel manufactured by TISCO. Over time, TISCO became the biggest steel industry within the British Empire. Industrial expansion in India. Now let us know about that expansion of the industries in India. The British import in India declined. Not only that, the market for Indian industrial goods increased. The nationalist movement also developed and the industrialists became stronger. The demand for government protection became louder. As the nationalist movement developed and the industrial class became stronger, struggling to retain its control over India, the British government had to concede many of these demands in the last decades of colonial rule. With this, we come to an end to this chapter. Thank you.